Well, hello and welcome to Plugged In or Unplugged, exploring technology in meditation practices. I'm Paul Barclay, host of Big Ideas on ABC Radio National, for which this Zoom discussion today is being recorded. A great pity, of course, that we can't all be together in person in the one room, but this is where we're at right now. I should also say the discussion will be available on our Big Ideas podcast and radio program. You can hear the program at 8 p.m. Monday to Thursday, and this discussion will be on in the next few weeks. The discussion today is hosted by the newly established Contemplative Studies Centre at the University of Melbourne. The centre has been established by a very generous donation from Martin and Loretto Hosking, and will be the first point of entry into the world of mindfulness, meditation, and contemplative practice at the University of Melbourne. Even though we are meeting virtually today, this event is part, ironically, of Melbourne Connect Innovation Week. You can check the whole program online with more than 30 events taking place this week. Check out the website. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I am today, and I'd also like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples from other communities who are here today. At no point in history, really, has it been easier to reach others, to access information and learn the lessons from faraway teachers. Despite the incredible advances in virtual connectedness, there's also been an increase in people's sense of isolation, loneliness, and disconnectedness, diminishing connections to community and traditions, alongside an exponential increase in expectations, has left many searching for new ways to live a more meaningful life. Is the answer to plug in using meditation apps and augmented technology, or to unplug entirely, go off grid and reconnect to nature? Or might there be some middle path? Joining me today to discuss the role of technology in meditation practices, Dr. Nicholas Van Dam, psychologist and mediator, and he is the inaugural director of the Contemplative Studies Centre. Dr. Addie Wooden is the CEO of Smiling Mind and a clinical psychologist by background. Bhante Shujato joins us from the monastery at the end of the world in Sydney. Bhante is a Theravada Buddhist monk and co-founder of the Buddhist website Sutta Central. And Dr. Elise Ballew.
Central, thanks, Paul.
Sutta Central. Sorry about that, Bhante.
No worries.
And Dr. Elise Ballew is doctor trained in psychiatry turned mindfulness teacher, and is the founder of Mindful in May. For those of you on Zoom, we welcome your questions. You can type them in and send them to us, and we'll come to those questions at the end of the session, maybe even throughout the session as well. So you do let us know what you think with questions, which are preferred, I should say, over comments. I suppose, Elise, a good point to start this discussion is to just get a few definitions on the table. There's a lot of talk, I suppose, about mindfulness these days, living a more mindful life. What do we mean by this?
So obviously mindfulness comes from an ancient tradition, and I'll probably defer over to the monk in the room for that. But from a science perspective, the way I like to think about it is it's really a form of kind of mental training to teach our brains and our minds how to be present to each moment. And in this presence, we gain more capacity to know what's going on, both within ourselves and outside of ourselves, help us to make wiser decisions and meet reality with greater wisdom and clarity.
Bhante, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, well, that all sounds good. I mean, as I don't know if anyone needs to defer to anyone, but yes, my background and training is in the early Buddhist scriptures and the application of that through practice and meditation. Mindfulness is strongly connected with presence, and just picking up on, Elise, you said present moment. This is one of my little kind of bugbears. Actually, like my background from the Buddhist tradition, actually the Buddha never talked about the present moment. And I think it's really interesting that we talk about that all the time these days. We find it's difficult to escape from it. The Buddha talked about being present, which is quite different. Like a moment is tight and hard and very narrow. Being present is a bit more broad and a bit maybe more flexible. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, practice of mindfulness is a practice of keeping your mind with what you want it to be, keeping your mind wholesome and keeping your mind applied in a way that's in accord with how you want to live, not getting too distracted, not getting lost, and not getting caught up in all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah. Addie, maybe I'll bring you in at this point. And mindfulness meditation, when I say that to you, what does that mean to you? How do you approach mindfulness meditation?
Oh, I think I would agree with Elise and Bhante that for me, mindfulness and meditation are connected, but to two elements. So for me, mindfulness is exactly what Bhante and Elise described, that idea of learning how to be present, to be within the moment, if that's not too narrow a frame of reference, and living life in a particular way. So being open, being curious, trying to cultivate that sense of the way we interact with the world and the way we interact with ourselves, I suppose, that sense of, I think as Elise mentioned, that sense of being able to sit with difficulty, being kind to ourselves, being, I suppose cultivating those approaches to life, both within and in our external environment. Meditation, then, from my perspective, is a way to cultivate that sense of mindfulness, how to build our capability to be more mindful. And it's an active practice of sitting or walking and being fully present for a period of time. So in alignment with Elisa's idea of that mental training kind of approach, it is a practice that is designed to strengthen our ability to focus on the present moment and to continue to bring our thoughts back to one frame of reference, whether that be our breath, our senses, what we're focusing on in the environment that we're in. So that's the way I see the two sitting together. Meditation is the formal practice in order to cultivate that sense of mindfulness.
And Nicholas, if I can bring you in, mindfulness and meditation have been sold as a cure-all for everything from insomnia to anxiety to depression. But from a scientific perspective, from an evidence-based perspective, what do we know about the usefulness of mindfulness and meditation practices?
Yeah, look, I think just to add a little bit on kind of what we've discussed so far, I think people often hear the term mindfulness and they think of various different things. And some people think of meditation, some people think of apps, some people think of being present, some people think of feeling nice, some people think of being on a beach and in a bikini looking good. So I think it's important to think about, that
not me.
when we talk about mindfulness,
like that. No.
when we talk about mindfulness and meditation and then their combination, we're talking about potentially different things. So, and as Addie alluded to, some people sort of talk about the sort of characteristic or things like that associated with mindfulness. When we're talking about meditation, many people talk about a practice. There is a particular type of practice that is mindfulness meditation. And we can save that conversation for later or a different day, but that's often the cultivation of this particular quality. So when we talk about what we know about mindfulness, the evidence that we have the most of is to do with sort of training in kind of mindfulness meditation programs, so structured programs around training people about how to be mindful or how to cultivate that feature. And so what we do know in that context is that it works reasonably well for a number of conditions. So, we talk about effect size in scientific research, and that's sort of like how big of an impact a practice have. And we often sort of quantify that as either being small, medium, or large. Obviously, if it's large, that's really good. If it's small, it means, it's probably not doing a whole lot. And the effects sort of that we typically see from mindfulness meditation for a number of conditions are sort of medium on average. the research is getting better, but I think where we're at presently is such that we still really lack a lot of kind of active controls in a lot of our studies. So we don't really know whether it's mindfulness meditation specifically that is benefiting people, or whether it's various aspects of how people are going about spending more time sort of focusing on the moment. Often practices are done with others. Often practices are people setting aside time to actually do it, whereas they might normally not have done anything. So there's many aspects of how these studies have been designed that make it a little bit hard for us to know whether it's mindfulness meditation specifically that is beneficial versus the various other features around it. And that goes too for a lot of the studies that have been done looking at monastics. So there's been lots of interesting studies saying, mindfulness or meditation changes the brain, or looking at monastics and saying their brains look amazing. They look like an 80-year-old man's brain looks like a 20-year-old man because he's been meditating for 60 years. And the reality often is, well, but we can talk at Bhante, a monastic life entails certain things, right? You don't have a lot of possessions. You eat a particular style of food, often vegetarian. You don't own a lot of things. You don't work for a living per se. You often
don't work for a living per se.
Well, you're not a CEO of a company, right? So you don't have to manage employees. Or
you try running a monastery.
It's harder.
You got to go get everybody to do what you want and be nice to them at the same time. It's a nightmare.
Well, but that's the being
and you
nice
don't get paid
the
for
ethics
it.
component,
right? Nothing.
When I think, at least if I can come back to you, when I think of mindfulness and meditation, I think of it increasingly in the modern world, at least, as an antidote to our forever digitally connected and distracted world that we live in. A world where the presence of that technology pushes us sometimes to the point of anxiety. So I suppose my question is, what role is that very technology playing in introducing people to some of these ideas and concepts around mindfulness?
Look, I think with everything, there's a cost-benefit analysis, right? And so delivering these programs through technology has its positives in a sense that Addie, Smiling Mind, reaching millions of people, which is a really big positive. People that would otherwise have potentially upon the practice. So there's the positives technology, but then of course there's, you're using the device and you're doing your meditation on your phone. And then it's very easy to just fall over to Facebook and start scrolling. But I think a great example is thinking about, this epidemic of social media addiction that we have and people getting lost on the scroll. If you have a strong mindfulness practice, and this is what you can get through the technology, you can actually become a lot more empowered to create the boundaries for yourself in your relationship with technology. So with strong mindfulness practice, which is this ability to stay present, know what's happening inside, outside from moment to moment, as you're scrolling on Facebook, you might go, oh, hang on, I'm remembering here, where am I? I'm lost in Facebook. And so then you can make a decision that is in alignment with your values. I don't want to be addicted to social media. So I think the point here is that we're living in a world that is filled with technology. There's no way out of that. And we need to develop exactly what mindfulness helps us with, this ability to be present and focused to manage all of this.
Yeah, Addie, maybe you can tell us about, for the uninitiated, some of the apps and technologies that are out there that help people, perhaps, well, both lots of people who haven't practiced mindfulness before, for whom these apps may be an introduction, but also those people who do, but who wish to augment their practice via the apps and technology. Just maybe give us an idea of how they work.
Yeah, there's a whole range of different apps that are available for different levels of experience. So I think if you're listening, you've probably heard of quite a few of the apps. Smiling Mind is one of the apps. There's Headspace and Calm. There are other apps like Insight Timer that offer a range of different meditation practices. And by and large, the way apps work is to provide guided meditation practice. So someone has developed a program or a set of guided meditations, whether that be a monk or a psychologist or a meditation teacher, and they have developed that in a way that is designed to introduce in a sequential sense, a process of learning meditation practices. The way we approach that is really to start off with an introduction and to start off fairly simply and build that over time. You can find meditation apps that are designed to focus in on different areas, like helping people with sleep or stress management, or a more simple guided sort of learning program of meditation. And then there's also, of course, a whole range of digital meditation programs that you can be involved in, similar to what Nicholas was referring to before. So more online mindfulness-based stress reduction programs, for example, that are structured programs over the course of a period of time. And then amazing programs like Elise runs with Mindful MA, which you can also access digitally, but may not necessarily be an app-based program.
Yeah. I mean, Bhante, of course, meditation goes back, we know, hundreds of years. It's been practiced by Buddhists and Hindus, especially as a spiritual exercise. How important is it that those traditions, those wisdom traditions, spiritual traditions, if you like, remain a part of mindfulness and meditation? And I wonder whether someone like yourself, who is a Buddhist, feels at all suspicious that mindfulness and meditation has been co-opted by the wellness movement.
Okay, well, co-opted. I mean, this is a kind of an ongoing conversation. First thing I think to bear in mind is that any kind of movement, philosophy, tradition, religion, or whatever itself consists of a lot of different aspects, many of which are themselves co-opted from elsewhere. And, as a historical student, then I know that the first mention of mindfulness, specifically in Buddhist scriptures, is found in descriptions of Jain practices and Brahmanical practices, not in the description of Buddhist practices. So we co-opted it from the Jains and the Hindus. Thanks a lot, guys. That was very kind of you. I think the copyright has expired on that one. So, and, probably they got it from somewhere else. So, everyone borrows from everyone else. And to me, that in itself is not really a problem. If there's something in Buddhism which is useful for people, that's great. But at the same time, there is a context, and especially there is a context that gives meaning to things. And the idea that mindfulness is defined by a desire for wellness, a desire for stress relief, a desire for ease, and so on. This is very much a modern innovation. The idea that mindfulness is there to help me deal with my psychological needs is very much a modern innovation, and this was introduced by John Kabat-Zinn. Please, Elise, go on.
I can wait, but immediately my mind goes to, hang on a sec, the Buddha, however many thousands of years ago, wasn't he on, in some ways, a pilgrimage for wellness, suffering of the human condition? Wasn't that part of his kind of motivation to go searching, this is horrible being a human, I have to die, I have to get sick, I have to, So is there actually not an inherent kind of wanting to be free from suffering in I'm being a little bit, devil's advocate, but
no, of course, yeah, no, Look, of course, I'm not saying that there's a complete difference, right? But if you went along to the Buddha and said, "Oh, look, I'm going to die. I feel sick. I'm really stressed," the Buddha would say, "Yeah, that's how life is. Suck it up." He wouldn't say, "Have this mindful app and make it go away," right? So there's a different kind of approach. So yes, mindfulness is a part of something which has a broader structure, which has a broader meaning. And it informs the values that you bring to it and the results that you get out of it. And I think that if you take mindfulness in a sense of just I have a very kind of short term and very very instrumentalized idea of what I'm going to get out of it. This is a tool that I'm going to use to get the result that I want out of it. It means you're predetermining the result. Whereas as part of a spiritual path, it's much more kind of open. It's much more like, how do I find freedom? How do I become a better person? How do I grow and fulfill my potential? And these are kind of much broader, much harder qualities to define, and of course qualities that are even harder to measure in a laboratory. I mean, this is one of my concerns. It's not the concern that it's been co-opted. It's being my concern is that we are co-opting it in a form which is aimed at and targeted at satisfying what can be scientifically proven, which is it's a very, very narrow and, to my mind, very, very dubious spectrum of what is possible. I mean, I've participated in experiments and so on with mindfulness and meditation on retreats and things like that, and I've seen how these things work, and they capture such a tiny, thin sliver of the experience that people actually have, that for us to think that this is going to guide what we think meditation is for, I think is really limiting the potential of it.
Nicholas, feel free to respond to that point if you wish, but I was also going to throw a question to you from the audience. I mean, we are talking not only about mindfulness and meditation today, but obviously its applicability via technology, via apps. And one of the Zoom audience members has fired this question: would there be use in a healthy tick type approval from a central mental health agency for online mental health apps, like the Heart Foundation approval being a validation of quality and peer review? Some kind of, I suppose, informal regulation of these apps, perhaps. Any merit in that, Nicholas?
Yeah, I think putting the comments from Bhante Sujata together with this question, though, raises a unique challenge. I mean, if you're talking about, I guess, to address the first part, if you're talking about having a central regulatory agency that ascertains whether or not a given program, a given approach or treatment or whatever you want to call it is useful for a particular outcome, and you're going to do that at a population level, which is what happens when we think about treatments or medications, right? We say that, we have a clear target. When we give this particular treatment or medication to individuals who have been randomized, so we also have a control, we have a placebo or another active control condition, we know that it reduces or changes some target in a desired way. And in order for us to make public policy determinations like that, we really need those rigorous controlled experimental trials to ensure that we're not promoting a medication that we just really want to work. So, imagine if that had happened with kind of the current treatments for COVID. The vaccines, obviously, even though they expedited the process, the evaluations have been incredibly thorough. And so, they were very careful to ensure sort of that these things worked in a particular way and that they did a particular thing. And so I think the difficulty then becomes, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a central regulatory agency or that we shouldn't think about regulated mindfulness meditation programs or apps, because I think there is a lot of variability out there. And I think a lot of people are really confused. They think, is a mindful coloring book, is that, the same thing as going on a retreat? Is what I do via an app the same as what I would do if I went and meditated in the foothills of the Himalayas for 3 months? Is a yoga instructor going to teach me the same thing as a monk or a nun? So I think there's a lot of confusion, and I think certainly some regulation could help with that. Should it be a mental health agency? I don't know. I guess it depends on the claims. Yeah. If we're claiming that a product or a treatment or a program benefits mental health, then probably. I think that the tricky part in the end, though, is what Bhante said, which is that some of the way in which we design our studies, and I wouldn't say that the scientific method as a whole is flawed. I mean, we could debate the value of the scientific method in another conversation. We have to control certain things in order to draw certain conclusions. We have to know that there's a particular element of a particular component that makes the difference, which is to say, if I compare two programs or two treatments head to head, there should only really be one thing different between them. And then I can say that it's that one thing that's different that is what impacts the outcome. And then I can prescribe that. And that's how we design our studies. But
for example, comparing the efficacy of meditation in lowering blood pressure to blood pressure medication, for example, making an assessment comparing those two methods, perhaps.
You could do that, but that's really tricky, right? That's not an uncommon practice. But the problem, as I kind of hinted at earlier, is that when you think about meditation, there's a number of things you're doing potentially when you're meditating. When you take a pill, you're just taking the pill, right? Yeah. That's it. When you're meditating, you're potentially sitting down. You're potentially doing that for 20 minutes. You're potentially listening to someone's voice. You may be watching your breath. You may be thinking positive thoughts. You may not. Maybe you're going somewhere. Maybe you set up a room in your house that you can lock the door and it frees you from, the noise in your house, the distraction. Maybe there's no digital connection in that room, so you don't get any emails. And currently at the moment, maybe that means you're isolated from homeschooling and all of the other things that are going, the pets running around, but the pill is just a pill. And so that's the tricky part in designing these studies, is that how do we control for all of the other stuff that you're doing when you're meditating? And I think really that doesn't mean we can't. It just means it's hard. So, and our aspirations in this research can absolutely be bigger than just saying you feel a little bit less depressed. We can absolutely say that we should, and I've said this numerous times before, we should be asking things beyond that. And we can design studies where we can look at how people's significant others report on their improvements. So rather than just asking a person, hey, do you feel better? Are you happier? Do you feel less depressed? We could ask their partner, do they seem nicer? We could ask their employer, like, are things going well at work? We could ask their children, are they spending more time with you? And we can absolutely design things where we could actually better capture some of the broader implications. And we can do all of that scientifically. We just haven't because it's difficult.
Andy, let me come back to you, back to the apps. They've obviously made meditation more accessible to many people. There are parts of Australia where it would be hard to get into a meditation class, for example, perhaps hard to find someone in rural and regional Australia, or even I'd imagine perhaps even some suburbs of Australia, where you can find someone trained in this to guide you through. So how, in a sense, has that helped to spread mindfulness meditation more broadly throughout the community? And perhaps also too, how has it changed the way people practice mindfulness?
Yeah, I think it does change accessibility in a couple of ways. So I think the geographic piece is one part of that. The other way that apps have made the introduction to meditation or mindfulness meditation more accessible has been in the ease of accessibility as well. So in the past, if finding a meditation teacher or participating in a program might have required quite a big commitment. If you are going to start off with a course or to go for an extended period of time, I think that has absolutely been a barrier to some people starting to explore mindfulness. And so the apps provide a short introduction that might be a way for people to explore mindfulness. So there's that piece of accessibility as well. Whether or not that is a good or a bad thing, I think, to Nicholas's point, that it remains to be seen around how much research can we produce, and how do we evaluate these different methods. I think it has potentially changed the way that people meditate in terms of the level of engagement or the intensity of the meditation practice. Doing a 5-minute guided meditation with an app is quite different to going to a 1.5-hour guided meditation practice with a group of people. So there certainly is that difference. And it might have also changed the way the educational components wrap around that meditation practice. Obviously, every digital platform is going to offer their mindfulness practices a little bit different, as in-person training is different as well. And so the way in which we educate people will be different depending on what app you engage with. What we've tried to do is embed some of that learning and education material into the start of our meditation practices. So we're introducing a guided meditation with some learning as well. But every app does it a little bit differently. So there is huge variability in the way meditation is taught and how we engage with it.
Yeah. I should actually tell the audience too that both Elise and Addie are clinicians who've moved in to mindfulness meditation. In Addie's case, a clinical psychologist who's moved into it, and Elise, a former doctor and trained in psychiatry, who's moved into this space. So they're, talking from both sets of perspectives, I suppose. And Elise, I'm just wondering about, the practicality of using one of these apps. I've got my mobile phone app up. I'm settling into the room, perhaps to take a break, do some breathing exercises, get myself into a mindfulness space. I'd imagine that things could be rather distracting if the WhatsApp messages and the Facebook notifications and the emails start appearing on the screen at the one time. So how does one balance the use of the phone for meditation with all of the bloody distractions that are that are on the phone that drive us crazy?
Or just to clarify, I guess Addie could probably speak more towards the app, because it's not what I am and super experienced, because I'm doing sort of more like an online program. And so in that, you know, it's there's live calls and it sort of shuts down that. But I know from when we do offer the guided meditations in the online programs, there are ways that people can actually, you know, use their devices or pull the guided meditation, download it, and then have their phone on airplane mode so that it kind of blocks those things out. Yeah. So there are definitely ways to do that. I think the worry is more like that you've then got your phone and, you know, are you going to be tempted to, if you finished your meditation, the phone is so close that if you're thinking about, oh, I've just got to check this email for work tomorrow, it's like a physical closeness. But, you know, you could argue that you could go and do a meditation with someone in person and then walk out the door and pick up your phone to do the same thing. So I think this is just also coming back to the issue of we are creatures that have these devices on us all the time. And so it's actually, I think the benefit outweighs the negative of actually training people's minds to be more focused and aware of what's going on so that they can catch themselves when they are falling into the digital wormhole.
I just add something. I think one of the great benefits of apps as they're set up, and I think this is really a great potential for them, is that they can actually catch people in the real world and remind them, right? So I mean that's something where, I mean, really at the end of the day, the goal of these practices is not to be present and focused and attentive and calm in a quiet, peaceful setting, right? The goal is to use what you learn, to use the skills that you gain when you're doing what we'd call formal practice in your day-to-day life. If you're not doing that, then what's the point of it, right? So, you know, if you feel great for 20 minutes when you sit and meditate, that's nice. But really, I think the end goal is that there's more of that in your life when you're outside of that room. So I think there really is potential for these apps to kind of to kind of interject and remind you to stay mindful and be mindful as you're out in the world and walking around and interacting with people. And if the apps are designed well, which they can be, you know, they can kind of prompt you or remind you to do those things. I guess one of the things that I see a lot of, or I hear a lot of, is that beginning practitioners often really struggle with distractions. And I mean, I think it actually, they hear sounds in the background, or they hear their phone buzzing, and they think, oh, you know, it's too loud, or I need somewhere quieter. And I guess it's one of the things that's useful, and you can actually, I know some apps actually do this explicitly, how to practice with your phone. They actually have guided meditations that are focused on how to meditate on your phone itself. And it's actually a really useful skill, because learning to deal with the noises in the background or the buzzing of your phone and how to react to that mindfully is much more close to sort of what we probably want people to be doing when they're out in the real world. So we're training them to the test being real life. Yeah.
Bhante, how do you view these apps? I mean, is this the real deal as far as meditation is concerned, or is it a poor substitute?
How would I know? Real deal. Well, I mean, I think of it as like an introduction, and I think if it can be a way of bringing people into it, and, you know, it can make changes in people's lives, you know, and it's kind of easy for us to, I guess, to sort of sit around, and probably most of the people here have, you know, experiencing some psychology and education circles. And for us, mindfulness is something that, you know, it's there, and it's, you know, it's been around and we're familiar with it. But there's a lot of people who just aren't like that. I remember one time I did a meditation not far from here. I'm in Parramatta, and these, you know, just doing a meditation in an afternoon by Lake Parramatta, and these Aussie ladies came in, and they did this they came in, they just happened to be walking past, they joined us. They'd never meditated before, didn't know anything about Buddhism, nothing about meditation, nothing about mindfulness. And we did what was for me a normal meditation. We did a meditation on loving kindness, and we just, you know, everyone wished everybody to be happy, and we had a good mood. It was fun. And for me, that was that was a Saturday afternoon. This is what we do, you know. It's nice, but that's just normal. And at the end of it, this lady came up and she was in tears, and she said she'd never felt that anybody cared about her before. And this is a lady in her 40s or 50s, and she's never been in that situation where she's encountered that kind of feeling of love and acceptance from something so simple. And so this is something which I think to bring that gift of mindfulness and awareness and love to so many people, it's really amazing to be able to do that.
Do you find that too, Addie, that once people are given an entree into this world, even as novices, that the experience of it, you know, in a world where they're frazzled and disconnected, can be quite overwhelming?
Yeah, look, I think I agree with Bante that like we do operate in a bubble, I suppose, of the world that we know, and it's not until you meet someone who may not have experienced any of this before that you see the opportunity to change people's lives, maybe in a very, very simple way. You know, and we absolutely get lots of feedback from people to say that, you know, they'd never even thought about this before, that, you know, these concepts are completely new to them, and they'd never tried meditation before, and they are finding that there's benefits for them. You know, for some people they're tiny benefits, and for other people they're quite life-changing benefits, and they might go on to more intensive and deep meditation practices and learning. But yeah, I see the app as a really a lovely introduction to get for people to experiment with. And I think I think there's a whole range of people that would potentially never even consider meditation if it wasn't for these more easily accessible ways of introducing meditation to their lives. So I think there's huge benefit there.
Yeah. Question has come through to Bante, but I think others may wish to add their responses perhaps. Quite a long question. I'll read it out. Contemporary critiques of mindfulness in corporate environments point out that exhausted, overwhelmed workers are taught mindfulness techniques to improve focus and productivity, and also help to make a toxic culture survivable, putting the responsibility on employees to manage their well-being, but not fundamentally changing the culture that's responsible for the stress. How can we make sure that digital mindfulness apps and courses are not used as tools to oppress others by numbing and disempowering people, especially because there is a real-life human element? Don't we need better human connections like a real teacher? I'll give that to you, Bante, first of all, and perhaps others would like to respond.
Yeah, great question. And yeah, look, I agree. It's also like, you know, was it possible? I mean, we've seen some horrifying things in the last year or so. I don't know if anybody saw the meditation pods at Amazon. Do you guys see that? They had these things. It's like portaloos, basically, with a iPad in it, with some meditation apps loaded on it. And it's like if you're working at Amazon, and if you're like, you know, being forced into yet another shift, and all the people around you are dying, and if you haven't got enough money and things like that, pop into this portaloo and do this kind of app. Oh, now I feel better. I can go out and be a happy little machine. So yeah, this is absolutely, it's something that's happening. And, you know, that's an extreme example, but generally it is common. Now, there's a few points I'd like to make. One point that I'd like to make is that I think we should counter that way of thinking in the way that we present meditation, especially through refusing to instrumentalize meditation. And I think this is something that we kind of get caught up on. We think that we have to package it as something like it's another thing that you have to do in order to get the results that you want to get out of it. And there are ways of presenting meditation that are going to be appealing and accessible that don't buy into that language. Because that's the kind of language which then becomes very easily co-opted for that kind of end. Now, if the question is are meditation apps going to be co-opted in this way? The answer is obviously, of course they are. Yeah, and they have already been, so not just meditation apps, but I know that some of my friends who are therapists and psychologists, they feel like they are also co-opted for this to get people better so that they can get back onto the machine. And so, yeah, these are all kind of genuine issues. Ideally, yes, if we can have genuine contact with the teacher, with the community, and a much richer and fuller expression of our spiritual life, then obviously that's ideal, but equally obviously that's not always possible. So I think that the most important, but the more important thing there is that problem is not a problem with the apps. That problem is a problem with the ethics of the company. And you could equally say, aren't they using toilets to oppress people? Or aren't they using microwave ovens to oppress people, or whatever it is, right? Because if you have an oppressive culture, they will use everything to oppress people.
Well, that's a good point, isn't it, Elise? I mean, we're talking about a platform here, a technology platform on to which you could put an excellent qualified mindfulness meditation teacher, a Buddhist with years of experience to help guide you through this. Or alternatively, you could put rubbish onto that platform. It's not the platform's fault. How do you, as someone working in this area, ensure that you're using technology to give people a genuine experience and to genuinely guide them through this and help them, particularly help them if they're feeling anxious and stressed and dealing with some mental health issues?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the program that I offer actually brings together some of the leading reputable teachers. So there's a kind of curation and a quality control that goes on. And then also the program that I run has a huge emphasis on community and interactivity. And so, I think from the Buddhist tradition, they had the word Sangha, which is community, which is this, we're wired to connect and I think doing things in community and support has such a powerful impact. And so what I notice is in our online, there's conversations and interactivity. And, there are people that are suffering pretty significant mental health issues that come because people are suffering and they think meditation is going to help. So for me personally, having a background in psychiatry has been a way for me to feel very, confident in sort of seeing what's going on. And obviously, if there are things that are happening, referring people, saying, hey, you might need to actually, it's not just about meditation, you actually might.
We have lost you, Elise.
Oh, sorry. In short, it's about,
you're back.
Yeah, it's about quality control of the teachers. And then I think it's important to have some kind of psychological backup because people are going to have mental health issues that are coming to meditation as well.
Yeah. And Nicholas, I should say this space that we're talking about, technology and apps and mindfulness, is huge commercially. I did some looking into this on the weekend. The Calm app, for example. We're not just talking here about one of the biggest meditation apps. We're talking about one of the biggest apps, period. It is valued at $2 billion. One of the most popular apps ever. Over 100 million people have it on their smartphone. It increased by 30% when COVID arrived. It's a subscription-based app, so it generates money for the people that provide it. I've never used it. All of the information I just gave you then makes me very suspicious. Should I be suspicious?
Probably. I don't know. It depends on your character, your personality. I think, I
suppose I'm talking about the fact that it reeks of commercialization. Should that make me suspicious, or should I set that aside? Because actually this app and apps like it may well nonetheless be quite useful.
Look, when I'm asked sort of by people about exploring apps, programs, teachers, I think one of the things that I often suggest is that they should look into sort of what's behind it. Who are the people behind it? What are their motivations? What are the terms and conditions? What are you signing up for? What are you agreeing to? I think there are many techniques, there are many apps, there are many programs out there that could be put to good ends, and they're the same programs could equally be put to bad ends. So I think the tricky part about all of this is that there are likely, I don't know, I've never spent any time on Calm. Like I downloaded it recently, and I could say that I've been inundated with emails to subscribe since I downloaded it, which I deeply regret now, which sort of maybe adds to your concern about being wary of them. But I think the reality sort of is any of these things can be used towards wrong ends or immoral ends. And I think Bhante sort of hinted at this idea of these kind of ethical frameworks that surround the practices, and that when you think about the greater context in which the practice has been developed, or what it's being applied to or how it's being applied, it's important that be considered. So who are the people behind this program? What is it that they're looking to do? Are they? And I mean, how do you judge that? Do you genuinely know whether the people are trying to make the world a better place, or are they trying to line their pockets, or is it something in between? For a lot of the companies, it's probably something in between. They probably are genuinely motivated to help people, but also have shareholders or employees, and they need to look after things as well. So I think it really creates a challenge, which is that in kind of the modern context, in the capitalist context, how do you use a set of practices or ideas that emerged out of a very different context? Capitalism. I mean, is capitalism and kind of Buddhist philosophy, or Hindu philosophy for that matter, is it compatible? I don't really know, and I think that raises some really big challenges. And so I think as people think about using these practices, I think it's really important to think about, well, where is the information coming from, and to what end are they using it? And I think that applies equally sort of to an app as it does to a practice that you're learning from a teacher.
So, Eddie, what distinguishes a good mindfulness meditation app from a bad one, without plugging your own?
Your app is free, right?
Yeah, I suppose the commercialization question is probably not the right one for me, because we've decided that Smiling Mind is free.
But just setting that aside for a moment, in terms of, I'd imagine there are all manner of meditation instructions, different instructions on these apps. Who ought to be leading the meditation, and what are some of the signs that an app has some credibility?
Well, I think that's even a complex question. I've certainly come from a clinical background, so I'll admit, at the front, that I take a clinical sort of view of this, which Bhante might have a different opinion. But my area of knowledge and my thinking is really around how do we approach this as safely as possible, and also make sure that we have people that have enough training and knowledge and experience in meditation to be leading and teaching meditation practice. So our approach is to be led primarily by psychologists or people with an extended meditation background. And I think if you're looking for a teacher of some sort, whether that's an app-based teacher or an in-person teacher, I think Nicholas is right. You need to do some due diligence on that to look at, what is their experience, what is their frame of reference, where have they come from? Are you looking for a spiritual teacher? Are you looking for, do you resonate more with a clinical sort of framework of thinking? What is going to work the best for you will be different for different people. So making sure that you do actually have a look at who's behind the different apps and programs, I think, is really important. But it is hard to do that as well. I think many of the apps, don't talk about who creates the content, and so it takes a bit of effort to find the right app for you. So I think from a consumer point of view, it can actually be quite a challenge.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Elise, you're nodding through that. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, look, I think there's another topic here which is really interesting, which is what people come to meditation for, what they think they're going to get out of it. Like the way it's promoted is come and get some headspace, get some calm, and actually this whole kind of spiritual practice of meditation is much more about, it's not an easy road, and it's actually often it's opening up to very uncomfortable feelings. And I love Pema Chodron, the American Buddhist, has the term discomfort resilience, which I just really love, that often like meditation can be actually teaching us discomfort resilience, the ability to actually stay in the here and now with what might not feel good. And this is a really big barrier for people. And so they come and, I don't know how you find it, but so many people will come and then they sit down for the first 2 minutes and it feels awful and their mind's going crazy and they might conclude, I'm rubbish at this and, oh, this isn't for me. And obviously the good apps and programs will immediately catch them and explain that, don't worry, that you're not failing. That's actually part of it. Our minds are crazy. So
it's really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. So I think the industry needs a bit of a PR overhaul, but it wouldn't sell, right? Like it just wouldn't sell if you put the signs up saying, come here and we're going to, you're going to be in agitation and boredom, but it's for a good cause. You're going to get better at knowing who you are and more able to wisely meet life and become more, able to be in discomfort resilience. It's just not going to attract people. So there's a bit of an issue there, I think.
Yeah, I've been singing from that song sheet for years, and it's kind of one of my bugbears about meditation. Like if you Google meditation, Google Images is like all these pretty blonde white women sitting on mountaintops in perfect lotus posture, and you're like, okay. But I think, you said you can't sell it, but I don't think that's true. I think that there are different ways of presenting things. And, Buddhism, Buddhism is not the only thing, but the Buddha was like, yeah, there's suffering and stuff. And he was reasonably successful as a teacher. I don't know. And, if you look especially, I think, at Gen Z, young people, I think that they're going to be more turned off by kind of boomerish, kind of let's all be nice to each other and flowers and stuff than they are by presenting something that's kind of real and a bit quirky and a bit weird and it's got some lump and edges.
There is a tendency to want instant gratification, though, isn't there?
Sure. Yeah.
And,
there is. Can Paul, I'd add to that. I think it's offering different entry points to different people in terms of where they're at with their thinking around this topic. So absolutely, for some people, they want to solve a problem. They might have stress problems, or there's an acute need that they're trying to solve. But there will be people that are on a different pathway and are trying, maybe thinking about meditation from a self-development point of view or from a spiritual point of view. So I think it is having those multiple avenues for people to pursue. And then as they navigate through their experience with mindfulness, hopefully, if the program is doing its job well, it will introduce new ideas to them that might spark their interest. And so if they come in to manage stress, hopefully they'll be introduced to the concept of that ability to tolerate agitation and that the ability to accept that we are going to have good days and bad days, and that life isn't all roses, and that we can't be free of stress for entirety of our time. So hopefully they will be introduced to those other ways of thinking as well.
Look, there's a pile of questions here that I wouldn't mind getting to. Nicholas, have you got anything that you wanted to respond to about that, or should I just go to the questions?
I'll just briefly say, I agree that, the way that the things have been marketing, I think marketed has created sort of some of this problem. I think we a lot of the marketing has kind of promoted the quick fix side of things. And I would agree that I think particularly younger generations sort of are very wary, reasonably so. And I think that, people, not everybody, but people are willing to sit through kind of some unpleasant things sort of to find some real truths. And I think that if we are honest about that people will be willing to stick around. As I think Banta said, that some people who have sort of not really sold, but kind of offered practices, in a very truthful and honest way, saying, look, this isn't easy. That kind of messaging has worked pretty well for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
I got a question here from Roland. I lead an online meditation group in the Christian tradition and have been surprised that it seems to work well, because I believe that being in the physical presence of fellow meditators was important. Any thoughts on that from anyone? Addie?
It's really interesting, isn't it? I think one thing that this pandemic has helped us explore is, how can we take things into the online realm? Having panel sessions like this, people are exploring how they can use digital platforms in lots of different ways. I think there is something pretty unique about sitting together with someone and practicing a meditation. But we have also uncovered, I think, during this pandemic that we can do that like this in a virtual environment together, and still share that connection. So yeah, it's great to hear that people are exploring that.
Elise.
I think there's an interesting line here with the difference of the energetics of getting a guided meditation that's recorded versus an in real time. Like if we were all going to sit now and do a guided meditation, because what I've found is that is so incredibly powerful, way more than what I had expected, when people seem to be able to feel, if you have 1,000 people on a webinar and guiding a meditation, which is kind of what we do in the group, the energetics is very strong. It's very different to a recorded thing where someone's sitting by themselves.
Yeah. And another question here. Are these apps gathering our personal information and data and selling it or using it to serve as a selection of techniques based on an algorithm? I suppose this is a question about ethics and mindfulness apps. Anyone want to respond to that?
I'm happy to jump in.
Addie, please. No, Addie, you go on.
I think, yes, you need to read the terms and conditions of any app that you subscribe to, because legally they do have to explain how they're going to use it. I think there is absolutely a risk that information can be used in lots of different ways. On the flip side, and I think ethics needs to be a cornerstone of how we develop programs and use the digital environment. On the flip side of that, I'm also wondering, is there an opportunity for us, if people are willing to enter into a relationship with an app, is there an opportunity for us to use that data to help, as Nicholas was saying before, to help engage people and to continue to help people to practice meditation? I know from a clinical perspective, when I was in clinical practice, you would meet someone once a week, maybe once a fortnight, and in that time between those sessions, lots of people would struggle to practice meditation. So can we use the knowledge that we do gather from people when they use an app to actually help support practice? But the privacy issues and the data protection issues are very important to pay attention to.
Yeah. And sorry,
I was gonna hand over to Bhante if he had a thought on the ethics.
Oh, I have many thoughts. But yeah, look, it's critically important, and I think that we have certainly learned over the past several years that there just simply isn't such a thing as safe and secure data, and we have to stop pretending that there is. And the only way that I work with technology, and all of these apps and all of these things have millions of lines of code, and there is simply no way that anyone can guarantee that it will be secure. Nobody can guarantee that. Nobody can guarantee that someone's going to use a bad password or is going to forget to make a configuration properly. You just can't guarantee this. And so the only really secure way is to not collect the data in the first place, number one. And I think that we should be really changing the way that we think about and that we use these apps, that we should be not collecting data like at all, or at least as minimal as possible, and only in the most transparent way as possible that is for the benefit of the people using the apps. Now, having said that, I think it's also just important to acknowledge that meeting with communities and groups does not also guarantee that there are no ethical quandaries there, because there have been numerous occasions of cult-like behavior, exploitative behavior, sexual abuse. We've seen this in terrible scandals within Buddhism. Large organizations like Rigpa, Shambhala have been subject to terrible sexual abuse and scandals, and people can get really hurt. And so in some ways, using an app might be safer because at the very least, you keep your kind of autonomy and your separateness. Yeah. And I think that so these questions about trust and safety are not restricted to the app world. They are real world questions, and they apply in apps just as they apply anywhere else. I don't, just to come back to the question was asked earlier, should we have regulation? I don't think regulation would be useful, but perhaps we need more recommendation. And I think one of the things that we do need more is more kind of a more ability to have just basic critical intelligence rather than just kind of a blithe, nice, let's accept everybody and love each other, because that's how we can just let people get away with stuff. We need to be able to make distinctions and to be able to say that certain kinds of behaviors are not right.
Look, I think we're pretty much out of time here, which is a great pity because there is so much more I could say. I just wouldn't mind going through, before I wrap, a number of the questions are really essentially statements, but it is interesting because they do connect with many of the points that have been made in our discussion today. Glenn writes, meditation is not necessarily a panacea. It is, in fact, one of the more confronting, sometimes disturbing acts, as it opens you up to the unknown within yourself and the world. It never leaves you the same, as it's part of a journey of life that does not necessarily leave you more comfortable. Secondly, the 65,000 years of Aboriginal deep listening is not about the present, but about the everywhere, when in the sense that deep listening listens to all that comes from the past, the future, and the now, and sees the custodial relationship with all within our world at the centre of being one with the universe. And I think it's really just a comment about Aboriginal ways of seeing and Indigenous ways of seeing needing to be included in the conversation. So thanks to Glenn for that. Lisa makes the point that what about the fact that different people find different techniques useful? 5 different people may react differently to the same technique. So some really interesting responses and questions from our online audience. And it's been fabulous to canvass some of these issues with you today. Thank you very much to the Contemplative Studies Centre at Melbourne University for putting this on. Big thanks to our guests today, Elise, Addie, Bante and Nicholas. Thank you to the audience for joining me on Zoom. I'm going to wrap it from here and hand back to the university with a little bit more info before we wrap it. But thanks a lot to all of you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Huge thank you to Paul Barclay and our fabulous panelists, and Melbourne Connect for hosting today's discussion. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. We welcome your feedback via a poll. It should be appearing on your screen shortly. We invite you to sign up to our mailing list, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can find those links by looking up our website, the Contemplative Studies Centre. Thanks for joining us today.